Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the worst day of his life unfold on the main screen. Red dots appeared everywhere around them. Thousands and thousands of enemy ships jumping out of hyperspace like angry wasps from a broken nest. "Sir, we count 12,000 hostile vessels," said Commander Park Min-ji, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They have us completely surrounded." Kim nodded slowly. Behind his fleet of 847 warships, millions of human civilians, huddled in cargo ships, passenger liners, and mining vessels. They were running from the outer colonies where alien forces had already killed entire worlds. These people trusted him to keep them safe, and now they were all trapped like fish in a net. The aliens had planned this perfectly. They waited until the human fleet was deep in the Kepler 442 system, too far from any jump point to escape quickly. Then they appeared from all directions at once, forming a perfect sphere around the humans with no gaps to slip through. Admiral called Lieutenant Lee Jun-ho from his station. "They are jamming all our long-range communications. We cannot call for help." On the main screen, an ugly reptilian face appeared. The alien's yellow eyes looked at Kim with satisfaction. Through the translator, its voice sounded cold and mechanical. "I am War Commander Vextai of the Hegemony Coalition. Humans, you are surrounded by the combined fleets of 12 species. Your expansion across the galaxy ends today. You will surrender all your ships and submit to our authority, or we will destroy every single one of you." Kim looked around his bridge. Captain Song Haijin stood at the weapons console, her hands clenched into fists. Young Lieutenant Lee looked scared but determined. Commander Park waited for his orders with calm professionalism. These were good people, and they deserved better than this. The alien continued speaking. "You have 1 hour to decide. Surrender, and live as prisoners, or die fighting a battle you cannot win. There is no third choice." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Kim could hear the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of computer systems. Aside the windows, he could see the lights of enemy ships in every direction, stretching to the horizon like a field of deadly stars. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Commander Park. Kim walked to the center of the bridge and looked at his crew. These young officers had families back on Earth. They had dreams and hopes for the future. The civilians in the refugee ships behind them had children who wanted to grow up and see tomorrow, but Kim also knew something about humans that the aliens did not understand. When you corner a human, when you take away all their choices and tell them they must surrender or die, something changes inside them, something the aliens had never seen before. "Communications, open a channel to all ships in the fleet," Kim said quietly. "Channel open, sir." Kim's voice carried to every human vessel in the system. In the warships, soldiers stopped what they were doing to listen. In the civilian ships, families gathered around speakers to hear their admiral's words. "This is Admiral Kim Tae-ho speaking to all human vessels. I will not lie to you about our situation. We are surrounded by an enemy force that outnumbers us 15 to 1. They have blocked all escape routes. They demand our surrender." He paused, letting his words sink in. On ships throughout the fleet, people waited to hear what he would say. "Next, but I want to tell you something about humans. We're not like other species in this galaxy. When someone corners us, when they try to take away our freedom and threaten our families, we do not break. We do not give up. We become something else entirely." In the refugee ships, mothers held their children closer. In the warships, soldiers checked their weapons one more time. All military vessels will begin Protocol Omega immediately. All civilian ships will prepare for combat conversion. Engineering teams start pulling apart everything that is not essential. Science teams, I want new weapons and new tactics in 12 hours. Medical teams, prepare for casualties. Kim looked directly into the camera, knowing that millions of humans were watching his face. "We have been in worse spots than this before. Our ancestors faced impossible odds and survived. Today we will show these aliens what happens when you try to cage humanity. We will show them that humans do not surrender. We do not break. we fight. He turned to his crew. If we must die today, we will make them remember the cost of surrounding human beings. Begin Protocol Omega. All ships, prepare for war. The fleet, something remarkable began to happen. Instead of panic or despair, the humans started working. Engineers began tearing apart civilian ships to build weapons. Scientists huddled over computers, designing new battle tactics. Even children in the refugee ships started helping their parents prepare for the fight ahead. On the alien command ship, War Commander Vex Thigh watched the human response with growing confusion. The trapped fleet was not trying to surrender or escape. Instead, they were preparing for battle against impossible odds. This makes no sense, he told his officers. They cannot win. Why do they not surrender? But the aliens were about to learn something that would change the galaxy forever. They were about to discover what humans become when you take away all their choices except one: fight or die. Captain Yoon Daejung had been hauling cargo between the outer colonies for 15 years. His ship, the Busan Dream, was built to carry grain and mining equipment, not fight wars. But as he watched his crew working in the cargo bay, he realized his old freighter was becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. "Captain, we have mounted the plasma cutters on the forward hull," reported his chief engineer, wiping grease from her hands. "They are not real weapons, but they will cut through alien armor if we get close enough." In the past 12 hours, every civilian ship in the fleet had transformed. Passenger liners that once carried families on vacation now bristled with makeshift weapons. Mining vessels had turned their rock-breaking tools into devastating cannons. Even small personal shuttles were being loaded with explosives. Dr. Han So-young had not slept since the Admiral's speech. Her science team aboard the research vessel King Sejong worked frantically in their laboratories, creating new ways to hurt the enemy. They had already invented 3 types of bombs and modified their computers to control weapons instead of studying stars. "Doctor, we have finished the new missile design," said her assistant, showing her a tablet. "We took the mining charges from the civilian ships and connected them to our navigation systems. Each one can punch a hole through a battleship." Dr. Han smiled for the first time in days. "How many can we make?" "With all the civilian ships helping us, maybe 3,000. On the alien command ship, War Commander Vexy stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Where his sensors had shown 847 human warships yesterday, now they detected over 3,000 armed vessels. The humans had somehow turned their entire civilian fleet into a military force overnight. "This is impossible," he told his bridge crew. "Cargo. Ships cannot become warships. It takes months to install weapons and armor." His tactical officer, a spider-like creature with 8 eyes, clicked nervously. "Sir, the humans are using their industrial equipment as weapons. Have turned mining lasers into cannons and cargo containers into missile launchers." But the weapons were not the strangest part. What confused the aliens most was how the humans were acting. When most species get trapped with no escape, they either panic or try to negotiate. The humans were doing something completely different. They were working together like parts of a single machine. Captain Cho Won-si commanded one of the fleet's heavy cruisers. He watched through his windows as civilian families helped load ammunition and repair damaged systems. Children who should have been scared were instead carrying tools to the engineers. Old people who could barely walk were still finding ways to help prepare for battle. "Sir, the civilian ship Seoul Morning is requesting permission to dock," his communications officer reported. "What do they want?" "They say they have converted their passenger dining hall into a weapons factory. They want to give us 200 new missiles." Captain Cho shook his head in amazement. These people had lost their homes, watched their worlds burn, and now faced certain death. But instead of giving up, they were fighting back with everything. They had, on another civilian ship, a family of refugees worked in what used to be a gift shop. The father, Kim Min-ho, had been a factory worker before the war. Now he was teaching his teenage son how to build explosive devices from cleaning supplies and electronic toys. "Dad, will this really work?" asked the boy, carefully connecting wires like his father showed him. "Son, your grandfather fought in 3 wars. He always told me that humans have one advantage over every other species in the galaxy. When someone tries to destroy us, we become more dangerous, not less dangerous." The boy nodded seriously and continued working. Around them, other families were doing the same thing. Mothers who had never touched a weapon were learning to operate gun turrets. Children were memorizing ship layouts to help during battles. Even babies too young to walk were being moved to the most protected areas so the adults could fight without worry. Back on the alien flagship, the coalition commanders were having an emergency meeting. Representatives from 12 different species argued in a dozen different languages, but they all shared the same concern. The humans are not behaving like any species we have encountered, said the insect-like hive queen, her mandibles clicking with agitation. Trapped animals either submit or flee. These humans are preparing for war. The serpentine seal-tack ambassador hissed softly. Perhaps we have made an error. Perhaps humans are not like other species. War Commander Vexia looked at his tactical display again. The human fleet was not trying to break out of the trap. They were not sending surrender messages. Instead, they were getting stronger every hour. More weapons appeared on their ships. More defensive systems came online. More missiles filled their launchers. Send a message to all coalition ships, he ordered. Maintain the blockade, but do not get close to the human fleet. Something is wrong here. His aide, a young reptilian officer, looked confused. Sir, they are outnumbered 15-1. What could go wrong? Vexazi's yellow eyes stayed fixed on the display, watching thousands of human ships preparing for a battle they could not possibly win. I do not know. But I have fought many species across this galaxy, and I have never seen anything like this. These humans are not acting like prey. They are acting like predators. In the human fleet, Admiral Kim's voice came over the communications. Again, all ships. This is your admiral. In 6 hours, we attack. The first human attack began at exactly 0347 hours, ship time, and it broke every rule of space warfare that the aliens had ever learned. Lieutenant Colonel Abaji Wu led his fighter squadron straight into the asteroid field at the edge of the system. His 12 pilots followed him through the floating rocks, using the massive stones as shields while they painted targets with their laser designators. When alien fighters came after them, Bay did something that made the enemy pilots freeze in confusion. His fighter had taken damage from asteroid debris, and his engine was failing. Instead of retreating to safety, Bay aimed his dying ship directly at a coalition destroyer and pushed his reactor into overload mode. Target the engine section, he radioed to his wingman. I will clear the path. His fighter exploded against the alien ship's hull like a bright star, tearing open the destroyer's armor. The explosion killed Bay instantly, but it also created a gap that allowed the rest of his squadron to attack the ship's vulnerable reactor core. On the coalition command ship, the Methachin fleet commander stared at his displays in shock. The human pilot just killed himself to destroy one ship. This makes no sense. One fighter cannot damage a destroyer, but across the battlefield, more human pilots were making the same impossible choice. Captain Nam Yunja's corvette had lost half its weapons and most of its shields. Her ship was dying, and her crew of 30 people faced certain death. Instead of surrendering, she ordered all power to the engines and rammed her ship into a coalition cruiser at full speed. The impact cracked the alien ship's hull and sent debris spinning through space. Captain Nam and her crew died in the collision, but they took 300 alien soldiers with them. Commander Oh Jin-ho was piloting a guided missile toward an enemy flagship when its computer systems failed. The missile lost its targeting and began drifting off course. Instead of letting the expensive weapon go to waste, Commander O climbed into an emergency pod and manually rode the missile to its target. He guided it by hand all the way to the alien ship's bridge, steering like he was driving a car through space. The missile hit exactly where he aimed it, destroying the flagship's command center and killing the alien admiral inside. War Commander Vexthi watched his tactical display as red. Symbols marked the destruction of his ships. The humans were not fighting like any military force he had ever encountered. They were fighting like wild animals that had been cornered and were now biting everything within reach. Sir, we have lost 17 ships in the first hour, reported his tactical officer. But the humans have lost 43 vessels. They're destroying themselves faster than they are destroying us. Then why do I feel like we are losing? Vexi asked quietly. The answer came from Dr. Han So-young's science team. They had spent the night turning damaged human ships into giant bombs. 17 vessels that could no longer fight properly were loaded with explosives and aimed at the largest alien ships. Captain Lee Sang-ho commanded one of these sacrifice ships. His cruiser had lost its weapons, its shields, and half its crew. But its engines still worked, and its reactor could still explode. All remaining crew to escape pods, he announced over the ship's speakers. I will take her in alone. But his crew refused to leave. Sir, we stay with the ship, said his first officer. We stay with you. Captain Lee's eyes filled with tears. But he nodded. Then we go together. All power to engines. Target the alien command ship. His cruiser accelerated toward the massive enemy flagship, absorbing tremendous fire as it closed the distance. The alien guns tore pieces off the ship's hull, but Captain Lee kept flying straight toward his target. At the last second, he triggered the reactor overload. The explosion was visible from every ship in both fleets. The alien flagship cracked in half and began spinning slowly through space, its lights flickering and dying. On other human ships, crews were fighting in ways that horrified the aliens. When the weapons systems failed, they used maintenance tools as guns. When the shields went down, they used their own bodies to plug holes in the hull. When the engines died, they used emergency thrusters to ram enemy vessels. The converted civilian ship Busan Dream had no real weapons, only mining equipment. But Captain Yoon Daejun flew his cargo ship directly alongside an alien destroyer and used his industrial plasma cutters to slice through the enemy's armor like cutting paper. We are not soldiers, he told his crew as they carved their way through the alien ship's hull, but we are humans, and that is enough. The aliens began to realize they were not fighting a normal military battle. The humans were not trying to win in the traditional sense. They were trying to hurt the enemy as much as possible before they died. Every human ship that was destroyed took alien vessels with it. Every human pilot who died made sure to kill aliens in return. They are insane, whispered the Crystalline's F-Tyrant commander, as he watched human fighters deliberately crash into his cruisers. Completely insane. But War Commander Vex Thai was beginning to understand the truth. No, he said slowly, they are not insane. They are something much worse than insane. They are human. The battle raged for hours, and with each passing minute, the aliens learned something new about their enemy. Humans did not fight to win. They fought to make sure that anyone who tried to destroy them would pay a terrible price for the attempt. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood in the engineering section of his flagship, watching the massive gravity well generator charge up for its final activation. The machine was never designed to work this way, and everyone knew what would happen when they turned it on. Sir, the power draw will overload every system on the ship, Chief Engineer Kwon Min-ho said quietly. The hull cannot handle this much energy. We will not survive the activation. Kim nodded and placed his hand on the engineer's shoulder. I know. But those civilians need a way out, and this is the only chance we can give them. Around the ship, the crew prepared for their final mission. In the weapons bay, gunners loaded the last of their missiles. In the medical section, doctors said goodbye to patients they could not save. On the bridge, young officers wrote final messages to their families back on Earth. The gravity generator began pulling energy from the ship's reactor and from the system's star itself. Space around the flagship started to bend and twist as the machine created forces that should not exist. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship as systems overloaded one by one. All ships, this is Admiral Kim. He spoke into his communicator for the last time. The breakthrough will begin in 60 seconds. Captain Park Soo-jin will lead the escape corridor mission. All civilian ships prepare to run for the gap. This is my final order. Make them remember what we paid for your freedom. The TDF engine began to shake as the gravity generator reached maximum power. Through the windows, Kim could see space itself bending around his ship like water around a stone. The alien interdictors that had trapped the human fleet started failing. As the artificial gravity well interfered with their systems, breakthrough corridor opening now, shouted the tactical officer, just before his console exploded in sparks. The flagship disappeared in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen throughout the solar system. Where Admiral Kim's ship had been, space now twisted and churned like a whirlpool, creating a gap in the alien blockade. Captain Park Soo-jin led 47 of the fleet's fastest ships straight toward that gap. She had volunteered for this mission. Knowing that most of her pilots would not survive, the aliens were already moving to close the breach, and deadly fire filled the space around the opening. "All fighters, this is Dragon Leader," she radioed to her squadron. "We go in fast and hard. Clear the path for the civilians. Do not stop for anything." Her fighters screamed through the gap at maximum speed, absorbing hits from alien weapons but refusing to slow down. Behind her, the other pilots followed, their ships trailing fire and debris as they carved a bloody corridor through the enemy formation. Lieutenant Jinho's fighter lost its left wing to alien fire, but he kept flying. When his weapons failed, he used his damaged ship as a battering ram, smashing through an alien fighter that tried to block the escape route. Commander Sun Myung's bomber took a direct hit that killed her co-pilot and destroyed her navigation systems. She flew by instinct alone, dropping her entire payload of explosives into the middle of an alien cruiser formation before her ship finally exploded. Behind the breakthrough squadron, the refugee convoy began its desperate run for freedom.
Thousands
of civilian ships packed with families and children raced toward the gap in the alien lines. The massive cargo haulers and passenger liners were slow and clumsy, but they pushed their engines beyond safe limits as alien weapons fired at them. From all sides, the converted freighter Seoul Morning carried 15,000 refugees in its cargo holds. When alien fighters attacked the ship, the refugees themselves fought back with the makeshift weapons they had built during the siege. Children as young as 10 years old operated gun turrets while their grandparents loaded ammunition. Captain Yoon Dae-young's Busan Dream had been damaged in the earlier fighting, but his ship still had working engines. When he saw alien fighters closing in on a passenger liner full of families, he turned his freighter directly toward the enemy ships. "It's for my grandson," he said quietly, then rammed his cargo ship into 3 alien fighters at once. The explosion cleared the path for the passenger liner to escape. One by one, the civilian ships made it through the gap. Mothers held their babies as their ships shook from nearby explosions. Fathers watched alien fighters through the windows and promised their children they would see Earth again. But then Captain Park Soo-jin made a decision that shocked everyone. As the last civilian ship escaped through the breakthrough corridor, she turned to her surviving pilots and gave an order that defied all military logic. "All remaining ships, this is Dragon Leader. We are not running. Turn around. We go back, ma'am." Her wingman asked in confusion. "You heard me? All ships, attack formation. Those aliens wanted to destroy our families. Now we show them the price of threatening human children." The surviving human warships, many of them damaged and running on emergency power, turned away from the escape route and charged directly back into the alien fleet. They had saved the civilians, but they were not finished fighting the coalition fleet. Still trying to reorganize after the breakthrough, suddenly found themselves under attack by an enemy that should have been retreating. Human ships that could barely fly were shooting at alien cruisers. Pilots who should have escaped were instead diving into the enemy formation like angry hornets. War Commander Vexi stared at his tactical display in complete bewilderment. They saved their civilians. Why are they not escaping? His aide looked equally confused. "Sir, I think they are not finished with us yet." 3 months after the battle, Ambassador Lim Jae-hung walked into the Galactic Council chambers wearing his black military uniform. The representatives of 47 alien species sat in their seats, but many of them looked uncomfortable when they saw him enter. Word of what happened at Kepler 442 had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Honored delegates, Ambassador Lim began, his voice calm and professional. "I am here to present the official report on the Battle of Kepler 442. He activated a holographic display that showed the battlefield. The alien representatives leaned forward to see the numbers, and several of them made shocked sounds when they read the statistics. The battle lasted 14 hours. Lim continued. Humanity lost 523 vessels and 127,000 military personnel. The Hegemony Coalition lost 3,847 ships and has completely withdrawn from human space. A crystalline being that looked like living glass raised one of its arms. Ambassador, we must ask about your species' tactics. Our people deliberately crashed their ships into our vessels. They rode missiles like vehicles. They converted civilian ships into weapons. This behavior is very disturbing to us. Ambassador? Lim smiled, but his eyes remained cold. You surrounded 2.3 million of our civilians and demanded we surrender. What exactly did you think would happen? The alien delegate made a sound like breaking glass. We expected you to negotiate. Expected you to be reasonable. We did not expect you to fight like wild beasts. Then you do not understand humans very well, Lim replied. In the months since the battle, the galaxy had changed. Species had quit the Hegemony Coalition and requested peace treaties with humanity. The Dralian Republic sent ambassadors to Earth begging for non-aggression pacts. Even the mighty Korthok Empire was reconsidering its expansion plans. The humans who survived the battle had become legends. Captain Park Soo-jin, who led the Breakthrough Squadron, is now called the Unbreakable by alien species across the galaxy. Commander Jang Mina, who turned back to attack instead of escaping, was known as the Mad Human, a title that frightened alien children in their bedtime stories. But it was. Or Commander Vex's final transmission that really changed how aliens viewed humanity. After losing nearly 4,000 ships to a trapped human fleet, he sent a message to every coalition species. Do not corner the humans, his message said. Do not trap them in a place where they cannot run. Them nothing left to lose. When you do this, they stop being a normal species. They become something else, something that will give your people nightmares for 1,000 generations. The battle had saved every single civilian in the refugee convoy. Not one child, not one family, not one elderly person had been lost. The cost in military lives was enormous. Over half the human fleet was destroyed, and thousands of brave men and women never came home. Dr. Han So-young, who survived the battle aboard her science ship, was now working on new defensive technologies. She had been promoted to head of military. Research and alien intelligence agencies were desperately trying to discover what new weapons she was creating. The aliens made one terrible mistake, she told reporters on Earth. They thought we were just another species that would surrender. When faced with overwhelming force, they did not understand that humans become more dangerous when you threaten our families. Captain Yoon Dae-yoon had not survived the battle, but his story spread throughout human space. The cargo ship captain who used his freighter to ram alien fighters became a symbol of human determination. Children learned his name in school, and new recruits in the military took an oath that included his final words, "This is for my grandson." On alien worlds, the story was told differently. Parents warned their children about the mad humans who would rather die than surrender. Military academies taught new courses called Human Warfare that explained why you should never trap a human fleet. Ambassador Lim finished his presentation and prepared to leave the council chambers. As he walked toward the door, the Saltac representative called out to him, "Ambassador, one more question. If we had not surrounded your fleet, if we had met you in open battle, would the result have been different?" Lim stopped and turned around. "You mean if you had fought us fairly instead of trying to trap our civilians?" "Yes." "Then you would have faced human soldiers fighting to protect their territory. Instead, you faced human parents fighting to save their children. There is a difference, and you learned that difference the hard way." As he left the chamber, alien delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of languages. They had all heard the same reports from their military commanders. Human recruitment was up 400% across all colonies. Human shipyards were working around the clock to build new vessels. Human scientists were developing weapons that made their previous technology look like toys. But most frightening of all, humans were no longer content to simply defend their own space. They were expanding again. This time they carried a reputation that made alien species think twice before challenging them. The siege of Kepler, 442, was meant to break humanity's spirit and end their expansion into the galaxy. Instead it had created something much worse for their enemies. It had created a legend that would make the galaxy remember one simple truth. When you surround humanity, you do not trap them. You awaken them. And once awakened, humans do not go back to sleep.